And so I took advantage of two people that are wonderful. And let me go back one slide if I can. Let's see. Wrong way. And many of you probably know Jana-Lee Heineman, who had been a previous vice president of IPSO and also the medical director for PWSA USA. As a social worker and a mother of a child with PWS, as well as Lisa Graziano, they put together some outstanding materials which have already been alluded to and which I'd really encourage you to look at. And when I spoke with Jana-Lee, she allowed me to shamelessly, as you all would say here, pinch from all of her great presentations. And that's what I have done with great gratitude to the two of them. Okay. I have no conflicts of interest, though I do have to say I have lots of interest in Prader-Willi syndrome, a lot of that having come from my husband, Dan. And we've been married almost 43 years now. And so I've gotten to learn loads about PWS just day in and day out at home. And I also have the great fun of being the pediatrician for Jen Miller's kids. So I kind of get the endocrine point of view as well. Geez, I need to figure out which way to go. So anyway, I would like to take a little bit of time. And how many of you here have children under a year of age? So a couple of you. So probably the early days are still very raw and painful, and for the rest of you that have older children, you probably can easily bring them back to mind. And as we all know, change of any sort is difficult. Even very welcome changes of a healthy baby with no problems, a marriage, a new job, a new house. But then having a new baby, as I mentioned, is really an incredible stress. But then with the diagnosis of Prader-Willi syndrome, as Jana-Lee would say, it's a massive stress. And it also triggers all sorts of emotions, including depression, grief, and a real sense of loss, and the loss regarding what you thought you were going to have in your new baby.
Sorry, keep going.
I'm sorry?
Keep going. Sorry, I'm just doing this.
The one thing is that we also know as the child grows, some of these new stresses are replaced or compounded, but also may recreate in your mind some of the previous stresses that were very clear to you. The way in which we react to stress is really very individual, and we end up knowing that our fight or flight with the epinephrine and norepinephrine cause us to be really ready to go forward and say, we can handle this, but we also need to protect ourselves. And the way in which we do it can be really very idiosyncratic. And so I think as I try to speak about strategies for success, not all of them are going to apply to everyone, and some of them won't work at all for any of you. But I do think my goal is to have us not paint ourselves into a corner so that we end up going ahead and creating a situation that may end up being detrimental to us over the years to come. So, not to belabor the negative side of this, we do know that parents of children with Prader-Willi syndrome have an ongoing grief because of the differences that they realize their child will exhibit over time. Though fortunately the intensity of the feelings perhaps do lessen, and the raw feelings of the pain and the hurt are not quite as strong as they are right at birth. However, as I mentioned, the new losses do kind of make you think about your previous losses. And what's really important for all of us is to create a support system for ourselves and for our families. So remembering we need to take time to stop and smell the flowers, we also need to come to terms with this loss. And there needs to be a time where you can express your grief and have people understand this loss that you're ending up feeling. However, at the same time, it's really important to try to develop new skills. You're obviously taking on a new role, you're making new contacts, and it's one of the wonderful things about the PWSA meetings. Not only do you make reacquaintance with old friends, but you also make new friends, and you develop an incredible support system because of people who have lived through many of the same things that you have. And what's important is to really try to reinvest your emotional energy in the present. So what's been suggested, and I have to admit, it's one of the things I tell my parents all the time, that the advice I give is really easy for me to give, and it's going to be much more challenging for them to take. But what we need to try to remember is it is the positive thoughts that create and will sustain our energy. And developing these positive feelings really are empowering and help us move forward daily. As many people have said, and I'll say it again and again, probably once more in this talk, is that you are your child's best advocate because you're the one that knows your child the best. The rest of us almost are putting in cameo appearances, and while we try to be helpful and we try to read the situation, you're the ones that know what's in the end going to work. We can give advice. And sometimes I have parents that look at me quizzically and they think, oh, she's not been there. And others go, oh, maybe I can try that. And if you look at the advice that you're given and say, some of it's going to work, but I know some of it's not, it's worthwhile trying to at least say, I'm going to take some of the positiveness that comes out of our interactions and try to move forward. It's been suggested that negative feelings really can become positive ones by just switching around the message that we give ourselves. And Jana Lee even suggests that even if it seems phony, trying to make yourself say the positive messages, because if you say something long enough, it actually becomes real to you. So I'd like to just try to mention a couple strategies for personal change. And I think all of you realize that from the time your child was born, you've developed incredible skills as a parent. When you first started with your new infant, you had the sense of real fragility and that anything you did might be really dangerous or harmful to your child. And now that sense of comfort in knowing that what you can do really is going to bolster your ability to move forward. I think it's really important to say, I'm going to tolerate less than perfection, whether it's simple things around the house or bigger things where you think, I'm going to kick myself in the shin because I didn't spend as much time as I should have with my child on homework, or making sure that she was going to be happy with the outfit she wore to school, and it really created a meltdown. I think we do need to go ahead and say, we're going to forgive ourselves when things don't get done or they don't turn out the way that we had hoped they would. Learning to ask for help is really important, but I think, again, it's not being willing to take the, oh, is there anything I can do to help you? I think trying to be very specific and what is it that your friends, your family, your spouse can end up doing, even if it's something as easy as, could you run to the store for me today? Or, geez, the clothes in the dryer has just stopped and I'm trying to get dinner going. Rather than just trying to say, you need to be more helpful all the time, because you're not. And with that comes the ability to express your anger thoughtfully as well as appropriately. There is a saying that a bell that has been rung cannot be unrung, and even saying that you're sorry doesn't take some of the hurt away. So I do think that sometimes it's very critical that we take a step back, maybe count to 10, maybe to 100, and realize that what we need to think is that there's perhaps a nicer way for us to say things to our family in much the same way as we would say it to friends.
4 minutes.
Okay. So in terms of things that we do for ourselves, it's not finding time, it's really making the time to rest, eat well, and exercise. And all of these things you've heard more than once, as well as the development of a support system. I think each of us needs not only our alone time, but also together time. And the together times are special, but they need to be with people that are going to end up being supportive. We all know people that spend all their time complaining and saying how tough their life is. That gets kind of old. So is that a relationship you really want to spend loads of minutes with, as opposed to finding some that are much more supportive? And when it does get to the point where you feel like it's hard to take care of yourself or your family, I think it's important to take the step back and say, maybe I should get some medical care and evaluation and perhaps treatment. And always remember to celebrate the small victories that you have on a daily basis. Strategies for medical care, I probably felt more comfortable trying to make a few suggestions here, but you can see this list is much shorter. I think it's incredibly important to develop a longitudinal and collaborative relationship with the physician. And while it's different here than it is in the States, where pediatricians provide the primary care as opposed to general practitioners as you have in Australia and New Zealand, I think regardless of the individual that you're dealing with medically, you want to find someone that you feel comfortable with, that you want to feel like the advice they give you is not something cookbook that they're rattling off, but that they really care about you and that they care about your child. And again, I have to say, if people are not responding to you or your children as you like, you are your child's best advocate, and it's important to find someone else to be the person who cares for them. The medical alert booklet was mentioned, and I do think that there are many physicians, nurse practitioners, primary care providers who are not familiar with PWS, as well as any times that you may go into an emergency room or need urgent care. And I think making sure that you have the resources that you need in terms of material that you can have in hand when you go someplace is critical, because people don't know everything about everything, and I can tell you that many people don't know anything about Prader-Willi syndrome. As a pediatrician, I want to make sure that everyone understands how important routine health maintenance visits are. It's very easy to get caught up in all your subspecialty visits, but don't lose track of the growth, the development. Those are the people that can help get you through the sick visits and be an incredible source of support if you found the right person. And I'd also like to really put a plug in, don't ever underestimate the value of vaccines, because what we know is that the face of pediatrics has immensely changed over the years because of our ability to get vaccines. Siblings are one that can sometimes be forgotten. And I'd also like to encourage you to remember that they're an important part of the medical care for the entire family. Very often, and as somebody mentioned before in one of the sessions, it's very easy for one child to say, that's not fair because somebody else is getting something. And I'd like to encourage what is appropriate, not necessarily what is equal. At some point, I was going to share with you, but time is limited, a wonderful prose that Jana Lee had put together regarding her son and how things had changed over time. And I'll be glad to share that with anyone who would like. But since we're running a little bit short, what I'd like to say is that we really can weather the storms, create new dreams, and build them together as a family and as a PWS community. And I think that's the positive part that we need to always remember.
Thank you.
That's not the one, so you want to put that back.
Know who that is, huh? All right. Next, I think she's already been introduced, so welcome back to Marylin Silverman. And,
No. We're just talking.
Oh,
We're just
okay.
having a talk.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to talk. Hi, everybody. How many of you I'm Melanie Silverman. I'm a pediatric dietitian